Hello and thanks for joining us from our studios in Israel. I'm Aaron Porras, here with ILTV's Morning Briefing.
This has been quite the turbulent week for Israel, with threats on two fronts that have threatened to boil over into an all-out war. Syria has vowed an eventual revenge for the downing of one of its fighter jets yesterday after it breached Israeli airspace, triggering IDF anti-aircraft defense systems. We've confirmed that the pilot in that plane was killed in the crash. Israel's ambassador to the United Nations says Israel actually attempted to contact the pilot too before shooting down his aircraft. Needless to say, this incident is the most explosive yet in the ongoing clash of tensions on the Israel-Syrian front. Israel hasn't shot down a Syrian fighter jet in a number of years, but security officials say that regardless of what the pilot's reasons were, this outcome was the only one possible once his plane breached Israeli airspace. Though Syrian officials have condemned Israel's actions and promised that a response is coming soon enough, the front lines are relatively calm 24 hours later. Things have similarly resumed an eerie calm on the Gaza border, despite clashes earlier this week that very nearly erupted into conflict. Last weekend, Palestinian snipers in the Strip targeted and killed an IDF soldier on the border. Israel retaliated by pummeling dozens of Hamas targets within the Gaza Strip. According to the United Nations Middle East envoy, both sides were literally minutes away from an all-out war. Mideast envoy Nikolai Mladenov has warned that regardless of the current ceasefire, the situation is rapidly deteriorating, and a stray spark may be all it takes to engulf the region into a war. The latest criticisms of Israel's recently passed nation-state bill are coming from Turkish President Erdogan, and he held nothing back. Referring to Israel as the most Zionist, most fascist, and most racist country in the world, Erdogan alleged that there is, quote, no difference between Hitler's Aryan race obsession and Israel's mentality that regards Jews as the sole owners of these holy lands, end quote. Firing back at Erdogan, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu said that the Turkish leader slaughters Syrians and Kurds and imprisons thousands of his own citizens. So the fact that this champion of democracy, Erdogan, is attacking the nation-state law is the biggest compliment for this law. The Prime Minister continued to accuse Turkey of becoming a dark dictatorship, and the nation-state bill, which passed into basic law last week in the Knesset, prioritizes Jewish culture, religion, and nationalism. Netanyahu and its other drafters argue that the bill preserves Israel's identity as well as freedoms for all, but critics both within Israel and abroad accuse it of oppression against Palestinians and other minorities in the country. Now, while Netanyahu is back in Israel promoting recently passed laws, President Rivlin is now abroad in Croatia, meeting with his counterparts and discussing the progression of bilateral ties. Agriculture Minister Uri Ariel and Economy Minister Eli Cohen were also part of the envoy, as were their Croatian contemporaries. But aside from increasing cooperation in immigration, security, the economy, etc., Israeli President Rivlin and Croatian President Grabar Kitarovic first acknowledged the two countries' shared history and commitment to the end of anti-Semitism and other forms of xenophobia. Rivlin began by saying how, quote, our shared past is not always simple, and it includes quite a few dark moments, but also quite a few heroes. There are 115 Croatian righteous among the nations, each a candle in the dark, end quote. Grabar Kitarovic responded in kind, adding that in their conversation, they spoke about shared history and, quote, about our duty to prevent these tragedies from happening again, end quote. The Croatian president also shared how deeply she was moved by her visits to Israel in the past. Her first official state visit to Israel was in July of 2015, and then the second in September 2016 for the funeral of Shimon Peres. For Israel, though, this is the first ever official visit of an Israeli president to Croatia. A new poll shows that across the political spectrum, the majority of Israelis support the LGBTQ+ community's access to surrogacy and other parental rights. The poll was conducted by Midgam and has a margin of error of 4.2%, but the results show that at least 56% of the public supports the recent LGBT protests. This number includes 51% of Likud voters, 58% of the religious Jewish Home Party, and well over 80% for the opposition parties like Yesh Atid and the Zionist Union. Additionally, two new petitions that were heard in the High Court of Justice earlier this week have garnered the support of Attorney General Mandelblit. The petitions demand the rights to have both parents of a same-sex couple registered on birth certificates and papers for adopted children. Mandelblit said that not allowing this until now hurts equality and doesn't serve a worthy purpose. Interior Minister Aryeh Deri, who heads the ultra-Orthodox Shas party, is against the move, however. He explained that there is no violation of equality and there is no practical purpose to the petitioner's request, except for a symbolic recognition of their relationship. Deri also added an argument in semantics, saying that, quote, Two fathers shouldn't be registered on the birth certificate because the certificate's purpose is to reflect the factual situation at the time of birth. In addition, the certificate's form only allows room for the names of the mother and the father." End quote. Mandelblatt's counter-arguments still weigh heavy, though. As he explained, "We aren't dealing with single-sex couples' adoption rights, since it was made legal in 2008. We are only dealing with the registration of same-sex couples on the birth certificate, and not allowing the registration of both parents may harm a minor whose well-being is of a major concern, as well as the parent who will not be registered as such in the birth certificate. This is unjustified." Well, here's a bit of news that will probably shock exactly no one living in Israel. Tel Aviv and Jerusalem have just been named among the top 10 most expensive cities to rent an Airbnb in the world. Probably due to the fact that the overall cost of living and the rent, especially in those two cities, is also among the highest on the planet. Airbnb is a popular and often cheaper alternative to vacation planning. Instead of renting out an expensive hotel, an Airbnb usually invites you into someone's personal home, either to share the space with them for a fee, or else rent it out entirely while they're gone. And with Airbnbs literally all over the world, the service has also exploded in popularity due to the fact that it's a great way to interact with real locals on your vacation. Local municipalities and hotel corporations, however, sometimes have a bit of beef with the service. They say that Airbnb takes away business from the tourism sector and also contributes to the cycle of boosted rents citywide. Some cities have even passed legislation restricting Airbnb in their sectors. Airbnb has widely rejected these figures, accusing the hotel industry of distorting facts because of the competition. Regardless, an average Airbnb will cost you roughly $87 in Tel Aviv and $82 for the night in Jerusalem. These are significantly lower than the average cost of a decent hotel in either city for sure, but compared to Airbnbs all over the world, those are actually among the top 10 highest rates you'll ever find, right up there with flats in Boston, Miami, Dubai, and Kuwait City. My advice? If cost is a factor, consider a trip to the Holy Land in winter months. Sure, it can get pretty chilly, but prices drop so low that you won't even care.
That's all for now. I'm Aaron Porras, and see you later with our main daily broadcast from Israel at 2 p.m. Eastern Time.